We were so overwhelmed by the challenges of shooting that one of our stars refused to come out of his dressing room. It seems hard for me to believe.
Steven Spielberg has directed some of the greatest films in history: Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, but there's one movie he absolutely refuses to watch again. And it's not because of bad reviews or box office drama. It's because of her. The experience was so chaotic, so stressful, that Spielberg still won't talk about it in detail. But behind the scenes, there's a story Hollywood tried to forget. And it all started with one unexpected casting choice. For most directors, watching their own movies is a celebration, a chance to reflect on what they created. But for Steven Spielberg, it's something he actively avoids. Despite being behind some of the most iconic films in cinema history, Spielberg has openly admitted he doesn't like revisiting his work. In his words, once a movie is finished, it's no longer his. It belongs to the audience. He's said in interviews that watching his own films makes him uneasy, not because of the performances or the stories, but because he can't stop seeing what he could have done better. Every scene becomes a list of missed opportunities. He notices the way a line was delivered, the shot he didn't get, or the moment he didn't push far enough. "It's like reliving all your mistakes," he once said. "I can't watch them without wishing I could go back and fix everything." There's only one exception. E.T. Spielberg has admitted he'll watch it with his grandchildren, but even then, he finds himself analyzing every frame. Most of the time, he'd rather leave the past alone and move on to the next story. But there's one film that's different. One he doesn't just avoid, he practically pretends it never happened. And it has nothing to do with technical regrets or creative second thoughts. It had everything to do with someone on set. Someone who turned the entire project into a chaotic experience Spielberg couldn't wait to escape. A person so difficult to work with, he quietly vowed never to collaborate with them again. And the strange part? No one saw it coming. The movie in question? Hook. Released in 1991, it was supposed to be Spielberg's imaginative return to childhood wonder, a modern take on the Peter Pan story. On paper, it had everything: a massive budget, a star-studded cast, and the kind of whimsical concept Spielberg usually thrived on. But from the very beginning, something felt off. The set was a spectacle, lavish, colorful, even overwhelming. Spielberg later admitted he felt out of his element. He confessed years later that he didn't love the film, and that the entire process was, in his words, a disappointment. The magic just wasn't there, and he knew it. But the real problem wasn't the script or the set design. It was the tension bubbling behind the scenes, the kind no one talked about publicly until much later. Spielberg was used to big productions and demanding schedules, but Hook brought a different kind of stress, one he wasn't prepared for. And that stress had a name. When Julia Roberts was cast as Tinker Bell in Hook, the announcement made headlines. She was Hollywood's golden girl, fresh off the massive success of Pretty Woman and one of the most bankable stars on the planet. Spielberg had worked with big personalities before, but no one expected what would unfold behind the scenes. What was supposed to be a charming, light-hearted role quickly spiraled into one of the most notorious Hollywood clashes of the decade. At the time of filming, Roberts was under intense media scrutiny. Her whirlwind romance and sudden breakup with actor Kiefer Sutherland became tabloid fuel just days before production started. According to insiders, Roberts was emotionally fragile, often isolated, and visibly struggling to focus on set. She would reportedly lock herself in her trailer for hours and frequently clashed with crew members over everything from scheduling to costume fittings. It wasn't long before tensions exploded. Crew members began referring to her as Tinker Hell, a nickname that quietly made its way around the lot. Spielberg, known for his calm and collaborative directing style, was reaching the edge of his patience. One insider described the atmosphere as walking on eggshells. Every day felt like something might go wrong. Spielberg did his best to keep the production moving, but the friction was undeniable. Years later, when asked about the experience, Spielberg didn't hold back. He didn't trash her, but his words were chillingly clear. "It was an unfortunate time for us to work together," he said. "No sugarcoating, no second chances." And when pressed on whether he'd ever work with Roberts again, his answer was a firm no. To be clear, Roberts wasn't some out-of-control diva. She was a young actress dealing with overwhelming pressure, heartbreak, and the weight of fame all at once. But for Spielberg, who was trying to steer a massive, complex production, it was too much. The emotional toll it took on him lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. He delivered the final cut, did the press, and watched as Hook hit theaters. But he never watched it again. Not once. Not even out of curiosity, because every frame of that movie reminded him of a set filled with tension, chaos, and a star he never wanted to see on set again. Before the chaos of Hook, there was Jaws, the film that changed Hollywood forever. In 1975, Spielberg took a mechanical shark, a small cast, and a whole lot of ocean trouble, and turned it into a suspense-driven masterpiece. It became the first true summer blockbuster, redefined the thriller genre, and launched Spielberg into cinematic legend. But over time, that legacy took a darker turn. What the world didn't see back then was the unintended consequence Jaws had on real-life sharks. The film terrified audiences so effectively that it created an entire generation of shark fear. People weren't just scared to swim. They were scared of sharks. And in the years that followed, shark hunting spiked. Populations dropped. Media depictions turned savage, all because of one movie. Decades later, Spielberg reflected on it with visible regret. In an interview, he admitted, "I truly and to this day regret the decimation of the shark population because of the book and the film." He never meant to vilify them, but that's exactly what happened. And once that cultural image was set, it was nearly impossible to undo. The irony? The shark in Jaws barely worked. Spielberg famously had to shoot around it, relying on suspense and John Williams's now iconic score to build terror. Even today, Spielberg avoids rewatching Jaws. Not because he thinks it's a bad film, he knows it's technically one of his best, but because of what it did to the real world. Every time he sees that shark fin, he's reminded of a very different kind of impact. One that spilled out of the theater and into the ocean itself. Still, even that level of guilt and regret didn't leave the same bitter taste in his mouth as Hook, because Jaws haunted him. But Hook? That one broke him. It's not just Spielberg who couldn't face Jaws. Decades after the film became a classic, another Hollywood name stepped into the spotlight, this time with a surprising confession. Actress Blake Lively, who starred in the 2016 shark thriller The Shallows, admitted in an interview that she had never, and would never, watch Jaws. The reason? Pure fear. Despite playing a surfer stranded and hunted by a great white shark, Lively couldn't bring herself to watch the film that inspired it all. "I was terrified of sharks before I even took the role," she said. "I never watched Jaws. Everyone I know has seen it. I just couldn't, and she's not alone." Jaws tapped into something primal. It didn't rely on gore or flashy effects. It relied on the idea of something lurking beneath you in the water. Something you couldn't see until it was too late. For millions, that fear was unforgettable. And for Spielberg, it was an unexpected reminder that movies don't just entertain. They leave permanent marks. But the difference between Blake Lively's fear and Spielberg's regret is clear. She feared what the movie represented. Spielberg feared what it caused. And even as fans continue to hail Jaws as a genre-defining masterpiece, he's left with a feeling that's far more complicated. Still, unlike Hook, he'll at least acknowledge Jaws. Hook isn't just a movie he regrets. It's one he disowns. A film tainted by behind-the-scenes turmoil and an experience he never wants to relive. Not even for nostalgia. Not even for legacy. Because when Spielberg avoids a movie, it's not just about the story. It's about the pain that came with making it. And that's why, decades later, Hook is the one movie he can't bring himself to watch. Steven Spielberg has crafted stories that shaped generations, films filled with wonder, terror, heartbreak, and hope. But behind all the success and acclaim are projects that left scars. Jaws gave him nightmares and guilt. Hook drained him emotionally and left him with a memory he'd rather erase. And while most directors proudly revisit their greatest hits, Spielberg doesn't. Not because they weren't good, but because the process behind them wasn't always worth reliving. Especially not the one film tied to heartbreak, backstage chaos, and the one actress he quietly swore off forever. He doesn't talk about Hook much, and he definitely doesn't watch it. Because sometimes, it's not the finished film that stays with you, it's what happened when the cameras weren't